Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Leigh Fuge, and in this video today we're going to be shooting out these two Boss pedals. In this hand I have a vintage Boss DM-2 from the early 1980s, and in this hand I have the new DM-2W Waza Craft. The DM-2 is one of those Boss pedals that a lot of guitar players are really chasing. These vintage delay units can fetch big money on the resale market because they were discontinued in 1984. The DM-2W is the newer equivalent to the DM-2. It's a more up-to-date version made with the Waza Craft guys. This contains two different sides, one side of which is a faithful replication of the original DM-2, and it's also a custom side with some additional features. So before we get too heavy into the specs of these things, I do have to say Boss are paying me for this video, and they have provided me with the DM-2W and an expression pedal that you will be seeing in this video as well. So let's start with the DM-2. This is often mistaken as the first analog delay Boss ever made, but that's not actually true. It's the first one in this line of compact series pedals. This is obviously the Boss style that we all associate with the brand, but the DM range actually existed before that. In 1977, there was a pedal called the DM-1. This was a bigger format analog delay. This was actually the first analog delay Boss made. The purpose of the DM-1 was basically to give anyone who was using a Roland Space Echo tape echo machine a smaller, more compact variation of this to take with them. Obviously, the big tape units are not easy to transport, and they can often have some quite big maintenance fees. So Boss thought, let's shrink this idea down, put it into a pedal that we call the DM-1. It's an analog delay. It doesn't have as many features as a Space Echo, but it sort of paved the way for all of the delay things that Boss were going to do from there on. It was the start of downsizing the delay. So in 1981, they came out with the DM-2. Now this is one that a lot of people chase. There's a couple of variations on this, which we'll get into in a moment, but the DM-2 only existed between 1981 and 1984, and then it was discontinued from the range. So with these pedals no longer being part of the core Boss line, and the fact that they're vintage now and they're quite hard to find, the value has gone up quite a bit. So you can expect to pay a couple £100 for one of these if you can get one on the resale market. So at the core of the DM-2 is a series of chips known as Bucket Brigade chips. As far as analog delays go, these are kind of the holy grail when it comes to what people look for in a chip. The DM-2 actually had three different variations. So what I have here is what's known as the V2 or the version 2 pedal. The version 1 had a Bucket Brigade chip known as an MN3005, and then the V2 that came out shortly after has another Bucket Brigade chip known as the MN3205. So the biggest difference between these is that the 3205 that was in the version 2 has a slightly lower distortion threshold, so it's a much cleaner signal, but it does have a worse signal to noise ratio. So there's a bit of a trade-off there, but most players that compare the two say they can't really tell too much of a difference. No one really knows why Boss made the change from the 3005 to the 3205 chips, but there's probably a reason, which meant the pedals became more efficient, or, you know, as I said, lower distortion. If you have a vintage DM-2 and you don't want to open it up to find out what chip is in there, you can pretty much tell which version you have based on the label on the bottom. This one doesn't have a label because it's been used, not by me, but this has previously been pedalboard mounted by someone. So the version 2s will actually have a green label on the bottom, but the version 1s will have a black label. So if you have one and your label is one of those two colors, that will pretty much tell you what version it is, which will then coincide with which chip you have. If you have one of the version 3 models, it's basically exactly the same as the version 2. It uses the same chips, and it's also got a green label, but the only difference is there should be a different sort of etching on the PCB board, so that shouldn't really affect the tone too much. So this version 2 I have here, I'm guessing is probably dated 1982 to 83, just by my own guess with this. If it was brought out in 81 with a version 1 pedal, and then they changed the chips to version 2 and then version 3, and then they phased it out in 84, that would probably put this at 82, maybe early 83 by my guess. With this being an analog delay, it doesn't have a ton of delay time. The max delay time you can get from one of these is about 300 milliseconds, so don't expect those huge soundscapey delays. This is a very short analog delay, and the great thing with an analog delay is the repeats are not pristine, so as the repeats go on they will degrade in quality, so you almost get this sort of tape echo style effect. Fast forward to the modern day and we've got the DM-2W, the Waza Craft version. Now like I said, this has two different versions. It has a couple of additional features as well. So we've got this little dip switch here which has an S and a C. S is standard mode and C is custom mode. So in standard mode, this is a like-for-like recreation of the vintage DM-2. This is fully analog, so there's no digital components in this, but the original Bucket Brigade chips are not present. This one does actually have an MN3205 chip, but it's not made by the original people that made the 80s Bucket Brigade chips. It's actually a newer company called Cool Audio. It's a very faithful recreation of the classic chip. So with this actually having a 3205 chip, we should actually hear the same thing as we do here, because this version 2 does actually have the original 3205 chip, and the Waza Craft version has the more up-to-date modern recreation of that. So in the standard mode, we've still got the 300 milliseconds max delay time. It's still very much an analog delay. If I come over to custom mode, this is where some of the tweaks happen. So the custom mode is the Waza Craft version of this, which has completely changed the sort of way this thing works. So we no longer have 300 milliseconds, we have 800 milliseconds. So they've really stretched that delay time out. One of the most common things that people will say is an improvement in the Waza Craft version is the fact that it does not suck any tone. So the original ones are known just to take a little bit of top end off, but the Waza Craft version will not do that. As well as that, we've also got, in addition to the custom mode, which extends the delay time, a direct out, so you could run stereo out of this pedal, which would allow you to run the delay into one amp and a dry signal into the other, which is a pretty cool feature if you're using a wet dry rig. And also on this side, we've got an additional input. So we've got a regular guitar input and then a rate input. Now this is where I'm going to be using the Boss EV30 expression pedal, because what the rate input does is it allows me to use an expression pedal to adjust the repeat rate on the pedal. So obviously I can use that to manipulate how fast or how slow my delay time is in real time. So now we're going to plug these things in and see what they sound like. For this video, I'm going to be using my Shergold Provocateur SP01, which is a single cut style guitar with a humbucker and a P90, and I can also split this to some single coil tones so we can look at some different pickup textures. This is plugged via the two DM-2 pedals. The expression pedal will be plugged into the Waza Craft version, but it's not plugged in at the moment. And this is running the Blackstar Studio 10 6L6, which is mic'd with the Lewitt Audio LCT 440 condenser mic. So I'm going to start with both pedals set to midnight, and I'm just going to play a little bit and switch between the two of them. So we'll start with the vintage DM-2. Now we'll switch over to the Waza Craft version. So the first thing I noticed there is actually there is a different delay time with the settings straight up at midnight. The DM-2 actually has a slightly longer delay, and the DM-2W has a more sort of slapback-ish, quicker delay. So that's not the end of the world. You can still dial in the same sort of sounds on them, but you can actually hear the DM-2 is noticeably darker than the DM-2W. So that buffer thing is definitely true. The DM-2W is a lot brighter in the output. So I'm just going to explore the DM-2W a little bit now. So I'm just going to play a bit with some light overdrive and a humbucker selected. I've got the Cherry Tone Centura on for my drive tone. I'm just going to play a bit and manipulate the controls and see where it goes. As you can see there, by manipulating the controls, I could go from a slap back to sort of a slightly washy delay sound, which is really cool for some ambient textures without getting too soundscapey. But I can also do that crazy self-oscillating thing by changing the repeat rate, the echo, and the intensity. It goes from like a high to a low oscillating thing. Lots of fun. So I'm going to do the same thing now with the DM-2W. So I'm going to switch this on, play a little bit, and just move the controls and see where it takes me. So the DM-2W does all the crazy self-oscillating stuff as well, but in a different way to the vintage DM-2. I think I actually prefer the sort of way the old one oscillates compared to the new one, but it still works great. It's still a lot of fun. So now I've moved the dip switch over to the custom mode, and I've connected the Boss EV30 expression pedal that you can see here on the desk. So this is going to control the rate. So whatever the rate knob is set to, I can use this to manipulate it further. Now there is a slight quirk about using an expression pedal with this kind of delay, because those Bucket Brigade chips don't like being manipulated or stretched. So the EV30 actually has a sort of minimum threshold control on the rear of the unit. What I've done is I've bumped this just above minimum. If this is set to minimum, what you will actually hear is a little bit of clock noise from the chip. So let me just put that to 0 so you can hear that. And if I move that up just slightly, it reduces the noise, up slightly again, and the noise is gone. So that chip is prone to a little bit of digital noise. This is not uncommon for a Bucket Brigade style chip, so if you do get one of these and you pair it with an expression pedal, if the minimum threshold is all the way down, don't worry too much. It's basically just the chip telling you, you know, it can do it, but it doesn't like being stretched. So what we should see now is a bigger repeat rate. So if I just move the repeat rate now all the way down, so this is the maximum delay time. Compared to the standard mode. So you can see there's a huge difference there already. Now the real fun with the custom mode is using an expression pedal. So I've got this now set to the minimum, so that's basically the repeat rate all the way down. As I push this forward, this repeat rate increases. So there you go, guys. There is a comparison of the vintage DM-2 from the early 1980s against the DM-2W Waza Craft version. It's a great modern interpretation of that classic vintage delay, but with a few little additional tweaks. So if you're someone who loves the real vintage analog delay sound, but you wish it had just a little bit more, the Waza Craft version is going to be a great addition to your pedal board. But if you're really looking to nail that classic sound, the DM-2 just can't be beaten. I personally prefer the DM-2 original version just because it has that slight additional analog warmth, and I really like the way that it sort of self-oscillates. But the DM-2W is super, super close, and there's really not a lot in it. It just has a little bit more of a high fidelity sound, much more sort of top-end presence, and obviously a lot more you can do with the delay range. Both are great pedals though. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought of the DM-2 versus the DM-2W. Which one you guys preferred? Love to hear your thoughts down below. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit the like and hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thanks for watching.